welcome back to In Case You Missed It. Before the break, we had our Now and Then with Hawksley Workman, Battlefords and Maniacs. I got Hawksley on the line. Hi, Hawksley.
Hi.
Thank you for jumping in here, Hawksley. I really appreciate the call. And I know you've had a crazy busy day with the release of the new single and, again, new video that goes along with it, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks. No, it's my pleasure, Bob. I'm really glad to be chatting with you.
Let's kick things off here with, I want to know what the catalyst was for the move to Montreal about a year and a half ago, right?
That's right. Yeah, well, my wife and I were living in Toronto, and separately we had lived there I had lived in Toronto for almost, 15, 18 years, and she'd lived there for almost 10 years, and this was right around when property values in Toronto, when it started to just as it started to breach the absurd, then we kind of thought, gosh, this has been our city for so many years, and we were about to get married, and we're thinking about buying a house. And it just felt like this city where we built careers and built our lives, feels like it doesn't really want us. So we moved to Huntsville, which is where I was from.
Right.
And it was almost like we had planned this somewhat early retirement or something. And so the two of us were out in this bucolic, wild, beautiful place, and we had greenhouses, and we planted garlic, and we watched the birds, and we had great relationships with our neighbors, and it was quite an interesting time. Then I was in Australia for 3 weeks with The God That Comes, which is the one-man musical I've written and toured for several years. And we were on the phones. We have one quality phone call per day whenever I'm on the road in order to sort of stay and feel connected.
Right. And
she just said, here I sit up in your old hometown in the middle of nowhere. You're away for 3 weeks. I feel like we need to make a change. And so we'd lived out in the country for 5 years. I came home from Australia, and we sold everything and moved to Montreal within months.
Wow.
I don't imagine it even took us longer than 3 months. And this is a city where I moved my high school girlfriend with my parents' Toyota Corolla. I moved her to McGill University, and I would have been 18 years old, driving down Sherbrooke, and I'd never seen a city that felt as magical as Montreal. And, of course, I'd never really been anywhere in the world, but something in me has always loved Montreal in that same capacity, where it always feels like every time I come to play here or come through, it's like, this is a magic town. And then I think you hit that age, where it's like, if you really want to do something, you're kind of running out of years. So if Montreal is on the list, you might as well just go do it. So that's what we did.
Excellent. And since you've been there, has it affected, because like you're talking about the romance of the city, there's something about Montreal. How did it affect you creatively when you got there?
Well, last winter I hunkered down. I had a little studio space that was a short trip from the apartment that we bought here, and I rode my bike through the snow every day to go to my little studio and to write. And I think effectively I've written one of the best records of my career. And I sort of feel like this city, being 376 years old, has a lot of ghosts. And there's I live on St. Urbain, where just up a few blocks north of where Mordecai Richler would have grown up. But this is a city that has a lot of old, artsy ghosts wandering around. And the other amazing thing is that, all of those great talents that came from the early 2000s in that burst of music that came out of Montreal and the Montreal kind of scene, those people are all still here, and they're all still fiercely creative and still exuberant souls. And that's another interesting thing about this place, that with where I am up in the Mile End, which is kind of where all those musos are, there's a lot of people my age who are still keen to make music that has a real effect on people. So I find even the network of people here quite interesting to be around.
And Q Murray A. Lightburn here.
Yeah, that's right.
Was that a connection that you made when you moved to Montreal? Was that already lined up? How does Murray fall into this equation?
I didn't really know Murray very well at all. Obviously, we knew who each other were. I'd met him a couple times, but nothing in depth. And when I was even thinking about moving to Montreal, I kind of reached out to him and said, what do you think? Montreal. And he's like, well, you know, he grew up here, so he's got that relationship to a city that you get when you've lived there your whole life.
Yeah.
But, you know, their first record, the Deer's first record, End of a Hollywood Bedtime Story, was such a big record for me at a time when I moved into my first, you know, real apartment in Toronto.
Right.
Which is to say I finally had a bathroom and a kitchen in the same place that didn't have bugs in either one. And that was the record that was on high rotation. And it really felt like I was finding my way in Toronto, and this crazy, beautiful, risky, edgy record was the soundtrack of my almost, I don't know, believing in the hype of my own sort of blossoming adulthood or something.
Right.
So I reached out to Murray pretty soon after I arrived to say, look, what do you think about producing my next record? And a lot of it was to do with the fact that, you know, I sometimes need to know that there's going to be an ear listening that I need to impress, you know? And so when I was going to the studio every day writing on the lead up to making this record, I knew that I had to blow Murray Lightburn's brain every day.
Right.
I knew that I had to write a song and kind of mock it up in a demo form and email him an MP3 at the end of every day, because I wanted him to feel like this kid is on fire. You know, I wanted him to be just so motivated by my passion. And at a certain point, he's like, his wife was telling me, Murray feels like when he's working with you, he's working, something about how it's like working with somebody, some business magnate or something, you know, like my intensity was like a little much at the beginning, I think, because I was just so intent.
So excited about it.
Blowing Murray's mind.
Well, and it's great because you mentioned that and you talk about the demoing process, and you actually posted the demo of Battleford's for us music files to kind of decipher, and it's astounding how close you were right off the bat to the final sound. It was really a matter of a couple little tweaks here and there, was it not?
To some degree, that's true. And, you know, I received a couple of comments about that on Twitter, like people kind of like, geez, you must have, like, this can't be the original demo. But it really was. And the thing is that we've all now been trained in the music business that, you know, back in the day when we were making demos on cassettes and things like that, like, you had to use your imagination because you couldn't sort of paint the picture with a vivid texture. But now, and having been in the music business for the last, 10 or so years, this is what labels expect. This is what people expect. This is what my publisher expects. This is what they don't want to hear something where they have to, where Workman has to call them up and go, okay, just imagine that over the chorus, this is going to happen, and then that's going to happen,
Yeah.
In some ways, we've lost our imaginations a little bit for that, and so you really do have to sketch out in fine detail, and that's in some ways what we've all grown in habitually to make our demos sound, so that there's no mystery about what the idea is behind the recording.
Right. Well, and is that not really your MO from the start? Like I remember you speaking years ago about, by the time you write a song and record it, it's a matter of a couple of days, and you're still in the honeymoon period with the song, and it allows you to go out on tour, and it keeps it that much fresher for you. That's been your MO since the start, is it not?
It's true. In fact, some of probably my closer, creative pals would accuse me of having had a career where all I've released is my demos, which is in some ways partly true, because I'm more enamored by the initial idea. Like, I like the feeling of a kernel of an idea happening, and that great old anecdote that gets told over and over about Bob Dylan and Leonard Cohen sitting around talking about each other's songs. Leonard says, I like this song of yours, Bob. How long did that take you to write? And he's like, oh, about 20 minutes. And then Bob asks, well, I like that other song of yours, Leonard. How long did that take you to write? Oh, 3 years. And it's like, I've always wondered what it must be like to have the mindset that you could edit and go back.
Yeah.
That moment of writing is almost like a performance, and I don't want to revisit it again.
Right.
I want it left alone.
Well, and that's a perfect antidote, because is Hallelujah not one of those songs that Leonard Cohen says he never really finished? He always changed verses around in it?
Right.
Right?
Yeah,
it was never really a finished song.
Yeah. I don't even know what that must... I mean, I think that's the true, bred in the bone type poet response. I just don't have it. I don't have that part.
Right. The spontaneity of it is kind of the part of the magic of it, is it not?
I think so. And I mean, I look back now and I can sort of trace the lineage of my musical instincts back to, like, my sort of founding fathers, as it were, which would be Michael Jackson, Led Zeppelin, Chick Corea, Bruce Coburn, and I think back to my improvisational need, and I mean, that's all Zeppelin was, I think,
Right.
I think that Zeppelin was the sound of excitement and creation caught on tape in the moment that it was happening. I don't think they weren't laboring over things, and I feel like that music is such a big part of who I am, that's what I seek when I, as a listener, and I think, too, why I listen to a lot less pop music now and a lot more jazz, is just that I'm guaranteed a musical experience that makes sense to me when there's a lot of improvisation involved. Which era of pop music that we live in, of things being fixed and tweaked and tuned, and that's not to say that there isn't great ideas out there, but I personally get lost when the human element is taken away.
Well, and it makes perfect sense, because that's, I think, one of the main things that enamored so many of your early fans to you. I don't recall in the early days hearing a song played the same live twice. I don't know that I ever heard that from you, and that kept things interesting. It kept us on our toes as fans to see how you were going to play it next.
Well, that's pretty cool. I mean, I often wondered if I was just ticking everybody off. If they were like, why doesn't this guy just play the song the right way? I don't understand why he's got to go and make a meal out of this thing.
I really think that was one of the big catalysts for a lot of us that kind of enamored us to you, and it could very well be where you got kind of the cabaret pop title from as well, right? Yeah,
I think you're right, and to be honest with you, the cabaret thing always was a bit of a mystery. I think I put a feather boa on and sang really high and occasionally wore makeup in the early days because I felt like some average Joe kid from northern or mid-northern rural Ontario.
Right.
And when I was kind of breaking into the Toronto scene, I mean, my dad was great to always... We would make 4 or 5 trips to Toronto every year to go to Sam the Record Man, to go to some drum shops, and we were acquainted with the city. I knew I was going to end up in Toronto.
Right.
And not because, I hate my small town, nobody understands me. I had a great time growing up in Huntsville. But that's not to say that I thought that what would the world want to hear from a kid from Bay Lake, Ontario? It doesn't make any sense.
Right.
So I look back and I think I was just a songwriter with a bit of a daring outfit. But man, I've not been able to shake it. All these years, I still look on Wikipedia, cabaret rock, glam rock, and I'm like, man, I don't see it, but
no.
Okay.
Yeah, you know what? It's part of that. I think it's part of the flamboyance of your performance that leads to that. I don't know how much of that is the clothes. I think it's the mannerisms. I think it's the way you project. And I mean, The God That Comes is really kind of a perfect example of
Right.
playing into that, right?
Yep. Yeah, it's so true. I mean, maybe I'm kidding myself, because you're right. I mean, The God That Comes, in a way, was the first 2 or 3 years of my career rolled into a perfectly sort of muscular 82 minutes of what I do best.
Yeah. I wanted to ask you too. You just finished talking about Huntsville, Bay Lake, Battlefords, the nostalgia in that song, and particularly the Canadian nostalgia. Like there's a lot of specific Canadian candy references there, right? Like Tiger Tail and Popeye cigarettes and the Pop Shop. Is this? Did you write Battlefords in Montreal, and was this just kind of you kind of thinking back on the brief history of where you were at that point in time?
Mm-hmm. I wrote it in Montreal. It happened sort of in the middle end of my long weeks of writing. I knew when there's a lot of nostalgic lyrics on this record for sure. There's even reference on Lazy to peeing your pants as you're running between the portable to the school to try to make it to the bathroom, and so I knew when I was writing this record that this was going to be the tone in a way. And I think, you and I are around the same age, I guess. You're probably a bit younger than me, but time when we're looking back, I think in hindsight, I loved the 80s. I still will go to bat for 80s music. I dropped out of the 90s. I was listening to jazz in high school. Grunge music didn't make any sense to me at all. But definitely when we were in the 80s, I felt like we were in an evolving world. It felt like we were at the cusp of a breakthrough in some sort of futuristic time. We really believed that we were harnessing the energy of the future. And then, fast forward a couple of decades, and we're really living in the future now.
Right.
We're living in a digital age that I couldn't even have imagined in 1983, 1984, when my mom was telling me to turn down my Walkman for fear that I was going to lose my hearing.
Yep.
So I really wanted to encapsulate some of that stuff that, looking back, felt wildly futuristic to me as a kid. And now as an adult, we were on the last, huffs of steam of the 20th century.
Absolutely.
Nobody could have figured this out,
Yeah. No, I agree. And then that totally just took care of my next question. So my next question, I'll lead it into something else. So between Battlefords and Lazy, this has this album feels like it's going to have kind of a return to that stripped down kind of folkier roots style that would always intersperse your albums. I think the only album that I would really say is truly kind of a folk album would be Tree Full of Starling. Everything else had smatterings of it in there.
Totally.
But that's what we can expect from this album. We can expect that kind of more stripped down folky with a nostalgic twist to it.
What you've heard is exactly what the record sounds like. Murray, when we sat down, he said, look, you've done overproduction, and you've done it great, and you've done it a lot. On this time, I'm not going to let you run roughshod over this. He said, this record is about your voice and your song, and that's it. So, we've come to that point in any recording where I'd be like, let me try another overdub. Let me try putting one more thing on. He's like, it's done. Workman, go home. You're done. And so what you've heard texturally from those two songs, there's no surprises. There really isn't. It is a record about songwriting and about singing.
And so that brings me to another question. You, during the aught years, you produced a lot of music for other artists. And over the last decade, you've kind of stepped away from that. Was that more of a geographical issue when you were living in Huntsville, or was that a conscious decision on your part to kind of step away from it?
To be honest, and this is being completely honest, I stopped getting asked to produce records. I mean, I produced the odd kooky record here or there.
Right.
I got to be on Sarah Sleen's last record. But the music business changed, and I think that the culture in general seems to say, look, people who take risks can get to the back of the line.
Right.
I'm trying to word this in a way that I can kind of make a narrative connection. But
The risk reward just isn't there.
Records there in about 15 years,
right?
Outside of my own,
yeah.
And people wanted to hire me because they wanted me to bring my wildness and bring my kind of my brand, which was almost an eccentricity. And that's what people wanted. That's what I was being hired for.
Right.
Always. Like, it was like, I've got the songs, I got this, but I need that wild. I need that exuberance. And then I think music started to change, and it became very computer-based. I also, like, when I would produce records, it was about the musicianship and the playing. And I sort of feel like my particular brand of production, not unlike, and not like Danny Lanois is a hero of mine.
Yep.
But it's in the same way that Dan Lanois doesn't really produce much anymore.
Yeah.
Because the radio is the sound of machines. It's not a lot of music.
I hear you.
Very little guitar on the radio even anymore. So, and I'm just I'm not that good at sitting in front of a computer screen. Fixing vocals, and that's what a producer does now.
Right.
It's a different job.
Yep. And is that so? Does that job primarily fall to Steve Bays in the Mounties spectrum of things?
Yep, and he loves it.
Yeah, because
Steve Bays will sit in front of a computer screen and tweak and tweak and tweak, and he's a genius. I mean, and I think that's even another thing that helped me deal with this. Like, even I was like, I don't really produce records anymore. And when I'd watch Steve work, it was like, I don't produce records because I'm not this guy.
Right.
I'm not this guy in not even a 1% measure do I have what Steve has.
Right, but you have that appreciation for that music, right? And we could hear it on Old Cheetah. We could hear that appreciation for that style and Steve's production on Old Cheetah, with Mounties being as big of a piece of your life now as it is. Do you feel like you've kind of got a bit of a reprieve with Mounties and you can kind of focus more on this coming back to the Hawksley style?
I think you're onto something here, because here's the thing. With Mounties, we got together as a total lark, and when we were drinking mountains of wine out in Vancouver, this music started to come out of us, the three of us, and it was all jamming. And I knew right away it was incredible. And I remember a week of sessions, and we got most of the first record in that first week. I flew to Germany and listened to the demos the whole way, and I just knew this was special.
Yeah.
And you're right. I accomplished a lot of, like, childhood dreams that I probably put away with Mounties. I am a drummer first and foremost.
Yeah.
I still see and think of music as it applies to drums and drumming. I'm still drumming obsessed. And what I was able to do on the Mounties record as a drummer, it fulfilled a fantasy for me that I didn't ever really think was ever going to be fulfilled. And I think what you're saying is, like, does that take the pressure off my solo thing to have to shove all this wildness in? That's exactly,
yeah.
Like, I got Mounties to be a boozy kook in, and with my own thing, I could have a whole new approach. And you're right, I didn't need to, like, with Old Cheetah, it's just pure wildness. I was listening to that record the other day, and I was like, what? This thing is so nuts. I mean, it came out of me, but it's definitely I'm nowhere near there at the moment.
Right, and that's kind of what I was alluding to there. We have two completely different records here from one to the next. Now it's been a span of 4 years in between, but
right.
Wow, like you couldn't have polar opposite records.
Tell me about it.
And it kind of felt like the in between records. Like when we got into Between the Beautifuls and Lost Manlicious, you were already going down that route of. Now I realize Lost Manlicious wasn't even meant to be released in North America, was it? It was meant to be a UK release?
Gosh, that sounds right.
But
that was back at a time when Universal Records, they still loved me to some degree, but were so confused and disappointed by what had happened with Lover Fighter, which to them was a total commercial failure.
Right.
Lost Man Licious and Between the Beautifuls, you know, Universal basically said, look, Workman, we don't get it. We don't know anymore. Here's your record budget. Call us when it's done. And I was allowed to kind of finish out my contract doing whatever I wanted. But it was definitely a little rudderless. The years after Lover Fighter were very, very dark for me.
Right.
I had a hard time feeling any sort of self-worth because the build-up for that record was so big. And, you know, all I have is music. I'm a high school dropout. I've got no education.
Yeah.
I've dedicated myself to music from such a young age with an obsession that doesn't really make sense. Now that I'm an adult, I can look back and think, no 7-year-old should have been practicing the drums 4 hours a day. It doesn't make any sense.
Right.
But it made sense then. And so here I sat with a whole, you know, after Lover Fighter, the label, you know, the international part of my career, I couldn't figure out if that was still on or not.
Yeah.
And in Canada, the people who used to, you know, take my calls weren't taking my calls anymore. And so I definitely had a few years where I was chasing something.
Right.
And Lover, Between the Beautifuls and Lost Man Licious, I hear a guy who is kind of wandering. I mean, for some reason, I was able to really pull it together on Tree Full of Starling, which to this day is, I think, probably one of my best records.
I would agree there. It's my personal favorite. I'm not going to speak for everybody else, but it's start to finish. I believe it's one of, if not the most complete album that you've put together, and it's cohesive, and it was fresh for you because it was so different for your fans to hear that.
Yeah, and when I delivered that to Universal Records, the company, you know, the sound of the record scratch could be heard as far north as, I'm sure, as Thunder Bay. I was really lucky that my A&R guy, Alan Reed, at the time, who's now the head of the Junos, you know, he had to push back against a lot of people at the label that said, this cannot be the follow-up to Lover Fighter. This is a huge mistake.
Right.
And he's like, look, we're here to sell what an artist brings to us. And again, Alan Reed was the kind of A&R guy that came from another time. That just doesn't exist anymore. So Universal dutifully put that record out. And I mean, I'm so glad that record kind of quietly saved my life.
Right.
And for people like you who've held on to it all these years, I remember figuring out the power of that record. About 6 years ago, I was going out on the road and I canvassed on Twitter. I said, you know, what are some, you know, songs that I don't normally play or whatever that you'd like to hear on this tour? And what I got back was a lot of people saying, can you play this song, and anything off of Tree Full of Starling?
Right.
And that was the response that was so consistent that I thought, man, Tree Full of Starling really did have this coherent energy. And honestly, it was a model for the new record. And the new record seeks to sort of embody that same artistic principle of having, it's a consistent ride, you know?
Yep.
Like the songwriting is strong, and it's a consistent ride.
Well, listen, I can't tell you how excited I am for this record. It exactly what you described was what I've been hoping for, what I'm sure other fans have been hoping for. It feels like you've kind of found your true north and your direction again, and I literally I'm shaking with excitement for March 1st to hear the whole thing.
Man, you're making me excited. I appreciate that you feel that. I feel that true north too. I think it has something to do with being married and being an age where I'm starting to be able to finally shake off some of the BS of 20 years of trying to get famous.
Right.
In a business that the prize is elusive, are the winners true winners? You know, at the end of the day, does fame make anybody better, or does it just destroy them? And I got up close to fame in the early mid 2000s, and I definitely took a step back. I feel like now I have a very interesting role in Canada as this weird guy who does whatever he wants. And it's not lost on me how remarkable a position that is to be in, because almost nobody gets to do that.
It's a very cool distinction to have, and I can't think of anybody more worthy of it than you, Hawksley. I really can't. So I love that you're in that position. I love that you're kind of back in your own game, and you're playing it the way that you want to play it. And whenever you do that, because we could feel it as fans, right? We could feel you exploring and trying out different things and working your way through things. When you're right, you're right. When you hit those little pockets of true Hawksley, we know it, and we know that there's nobody like you out there. And I think that's where you get that distinction from. I just want to mention here that I apologize. I've used up way more of your time than I was allotted, but I want to mention the Eastern Canada dates that are coming up. The tour kicks off May 23rd in Peterborough, with stops in Ottawa, St. John's, Halifax, Charlottetown, Fredericton, Elgin, and Dorchester. Do you have any idea, any kind of hint that you can give us as to when you are actually heading a little bit further west?
Yeah, here's how this is how the music business insiders kind of will look at what's happening right now. Yeah. For Canadian musicians, summer is sanctified. It's full of festivals and opportunities to play live to large amounts of people. So what ends up happening when you release a record is your agent tries to dance around July and August.
Right.
And so right now, we're sort of quietly putting in our festival life together for June, July, and August, and then that brings us to fall, where kind of the rest of things happen. And if I was told expressly by my manager talking to you, you can't talk about the dates. Oh man, it's driving me crazy. But,
all right. Well, I won't get you in any trouble then. I won't get you in any trouble. I won't get you into any trouble. I won't force you to talk about it.
I'm a road dog, and I'll be everywhere in Canada over the next 12 to 16 months. Absolutely.
Love it. All right, Hawksley, thank you so much for joining us, and good luck on the little Eastern trip. Oh, and you're going west first, right? Are you not? You're going to Regina. You got that drum workshop in Regina.
Saskatoon,
yeah.
At the end of this month.
That's right, end of January. That drum workshop, I'm telling you, if that had been announced before Christmas, you know what I would have asked for. Thanks again, Hawksley. Good luck with everything, and I hope to talk to you again in the future.
Yeah, I do too, because I really am grateful for this. I really, really, truly am. Thank you for your interest.